Please welcome world-renowned public speaker and entrepreneur, Vusi Thembekwayo.
Hello everybody, we're having a little, I want to make sure I'm in shot all the time. So let me see, if I go here, that's perfect. And if I'm, all right, okay. Hello everybody, thank you so much for having had me here, Drew and the team. I've come quite a long way actually with what is, as is the consumer name now, Neolife. I remember if we're in 2021, holy smokes, I just said that out loud. 2021, that's how far we are. But I remember speaking at a GNLD conference in Uganda in 2008, I want to say, and then a GNLD conference in Kenya in 2009. So it's been quite a journey. I've got a couple of thoughts and ideas I'd like to share with you. Let me just very quickly up front give you a couple of disclaimers in terms of my style. First, I'm going to tell you how it is, not how you'd like for it to be. So there are some things I'm going to say which I'm almost sure you're going to find your back up against the wall. That's good, that's important, because it means we're listening, we're growing, and we're developing each other. Second, my approach is to remove as much theory as possible in everything I share. So what I look for is the science, not the theory. So my expectation here today and my anticipation is that I'm going to share with you the science about what we know. And the science about what exactly? My area of expertise, which I've honed over the past 20 years, say, has been trying to figure out how do you make step changes in your performance. That's it. If you're performing here, how do you get here? And whatever here is for you is here for you. And how do you make this leap, this jump to the next level of performance? Because if you think about it, that's all we're trying to do, all of us. Whether you're the CEO of a large listed company on the JSE, the most capitalized, deepest liquid capital markets in the continent, or you're somebody who's a direct selling agent, we're all trying to do the same thing. Move for performance from here to here. And so the question is, how? How do you actually do that? So quickly about myself, just an introduction. The image you see on screen is mom and dad. Mom and dad were born in the year 1955. They met in 1965. They were 10 when they met. Just for purpose of clarity, the image is not a picture of mom and dad at 10. It's just a picture of mom and dad that I like. There's somebody watching this going, hey, look a bit old for 10 years old, eh? It's not a picture of them at 10. I come from Benoni, which is actually not too far from where we are. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the East Rand. It's called the home of heroes. This is me as a young man winning the world championship in public speaking for the first time. I was 17 at the time. The two ladies next to me, Tarquin Phillips and Yasmin Mutara, were my sparring partners. So public speaking is a lot like boxing. You get sparring partners who prep you for competition. I won it first at 17, second at 22, set the world record at 22. My world record still stands. All this just to tell you that I'm a two-time world champion public speaker, or, as Drew said, I have to mention, I'm as good as they say I am. Good. Now that that's done, let's go to what it is I want to share with you. This idea that what got you here won't get you there. Now, we all have a set of beliefs, techniques, tactics, ideologies, and how we do things that get us to a point in time. Then the environment we're in changes. COVID happens. The market contracts. Or, as is the case with your business, the market gets one hell of a lot more competitive. And why does it get more competitive? Because it's lucrative. It's incredibly lucrative. First, diet, nutrition, and looking good is actually a part of people's lingua franca now. Accelerated in part by that social media platform called Instagram. And all the ladies in watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I do this. Why do all women, have you seen that? You guys all do that thing where you like do this with your foot and then, whatever it is, please stop doing it. But accelerated in part by that thing called Instagram, your environment and your market has become incredibly competitive. Incredibly competitive. In the middle of all of this, if you haven't caught it, the DSASA has now gone to the regulators and asked that you've got to get the scammer artists and the scammer businesses out of the game. I think that's a fundamental part of how we accelerate the Direct Selling Association and the direct selling industry going forward. The only point I'm trying to make is this. Scammers only go where there's a return, which means your market has become incredibly lucrative. So what next do I want to share with you? Well, what I'm going to try and do is just give you a couple of tips around how you do things if you want to make the shift and change. These are the things I do every day, so I'm talking about stuff that I know actually works. The first is, let's talk a bit about how you lead. Then I want to talk a bit about how you create a culture of performance in your own business. And it's so important because ultimately, as a direct selling distributor, here's what that means. It means that you work and achieve success through other people. So very important. Skip the products. I want to talk a bit about enablers, but first where I want to start is this idea of context. So let me introduce you to the only woman for whom I would leave my wife. This is she, Serena Williams. My wife knows this. It's not a surprise to her. We've discussed this. We even have, it's written in the will that when I die, about 1% of my net worth will go to Serena Williams. Of course, she probably won't even get it because she's much, much, much wealthier than I could ever dream to be. Serena Williams is the most dominating female tennis player, not of our generation, of all time. If you played a game of tennis against Serena Williams, they say she would serve a ball in your direction at 143 kilometers per hour. What that looks like is she would go, and you'd be doing this. And all you'd hear is, but you wouldn't see the ball. It'd go right past you, right? Serena Williams has been playing tennis since she was 3 years old. You know when they talk about doing something for 10,000 hours? She's done her 10,000 hours probably a couple of thousand times over. The most dominating female tennis player of all time, but here's the point. This is the layout of a tennis court. Looks this way and has looked this way since the 1920s. Rules haven't changed, not fundamentally, since the 1980s. So Serena Williams is good at a game where the rules don't change. For you and me, the rules are changing every single day. And if the rules of the game you and I are playing are changing, then how we approach the game has to change. I posted a picture on my, I think it was on my IG, day before yesterday. I've got a team of people that work for me. We just announced a transaction I've just done in Dubai. Over December, we announced a transaction that I'd done in Middle East, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania. The point is, I've got people who work for me. Young lady reached out to me on IG the other day and said, "Hi, Vusi, I bought your books in December 28th. The books have not been delivered yet." I got a hold of my team. I made sure that she received the books. I then contacted her and phoned her and said, "Did you get the books and when were the books delivered?" So the point about it is no matter how high up the chain you go, you are never too high up to worry about every single moving part of your value chain, every single customer experience. And that's the thing I want to talk to next, customer experience. So how do you know if you're delivering an amazing customer experience? And I'm going to share with you the how. The thing about this word customer experience, and it annoys me a lot, is because people talk about it, very few people tell you how to do it. So it's one thing to tell me I need to give my customers or my downline or my distributors an amazing experience. That's one thing. But how do I do it? And what I'm going to do with you very quickly is share with you the how. First, that red square, you see it? That red square talks about making sure that what you offer your customer, your distributor, is relevant. In other words, it's got to be personalized and meaningful for them. Now, you can never make personalized and meaningful an experience, a product, a business opportunity unless you know the person of the person you're dealing with. You have to know their hopes, their dreams, their ambitions. What do they want to do with the additional income? Where do they see themselves? Unless you know each and every single person within your downline, it's going to be very difficult for you to make personalized and meaningful the business opportunity. Second, be convenient. The most important part about this convenience is that word consistency. And I want to pause on this word because I think it's really, really important. Arguably, the world's most consistent business is McDonald's. I mean, if you think about it this way. No matter where in the world you are, and I know, we're nutrition conscious business, so it's probably not passé to mention McDonald's. But it goes without saying that McDonald's doesn't make the world's most nutritious burgers. They also don't make the world's tastiest burgers. So how come they're the world's largest retailer of burgers? How come tastiest and best doesn't occupy position number one? Well, here's why. McDonald's is very clear about what their business is. Their business is making sure that a McDonald's burger tastes the same no matter where in the world you taste it. And trust me, I've tried this. I've had one in Bangalore, in Bangkok, in Berlin, Benoni, Brooklyn, and one other place starting with B. I can't remember the name. I've actually done it. and it tastes but exactly the same. Why? McDonald's says when it comes to customer service and customer experience, being inconsistently good is worse than being consistently bad. I want to pause and let you take that in for a minute. Being inconsistently good is worse than being consistently bad. So I want to just come home and narrow this very quickly. As a humor me, the South Africans in the conversation. When was the last time you went on social media and saw someone complaining about the experience they got at a Home Affairs? A very long time, right? Does that mean Home Affairs has all of a sudden upped their quality standards or their service standards? No. Do you know why they're not complaining? Because when you go to Home Affairs, you expect bad service. It's built into your emotional expectation. Here's what pisses customers off, and I use that word deliberately. It's when you're good, then you're not, then you're good, then you're not, then you're good, then you're not. So what drives customer experience is actually the oscillation between best and worst. What that means for you, as particularly those of you who've got a downline and who manage people who drive product, you've got to make sure every single person in your downline is consistent on their level of performance. And here's what you've got to learn. If they don't meet that level of performance, you've got to train, retrain, or fire. But you've got to make a decision. Because if you're good and not, and good and not, and good and not, that's a reflection of you. There's a beautiful expression the Americans and the Navy SEALs use. They say this: there is no such thing as a bad soldier, only bad generals. Just think about that. There's no such thing as bad soldiers. There's no such thing as bad salespeople. There's no such thing as bad distributors. Only bad leaders. So if you have people in your downline who are not making the numbers, who are not performing, that's a reflection of you. It's not a reflection of them. That's a reflection of how you train. It's a reflection of what you're willing to tolerate. It's even a reflection of what you let happen. You have to set the standards and constantly make sure people meet those standards. Excellence doesn't have rest time. It doesn't knock off at 5 o'clock. That's not the way it works. Be consistent. Third is this. You have a brand promise. Make sure that you meet that brand promise. Now, that's about reliability. The business of Neolife, the products of Neolife, commit something to the market. Your job is to make sure that that which they commit, they meet. You know what really, really loses you credibility? It's not when you don't meet customer expectations. It's when you set the expectation above the point beyond which you can meet. So what a lot of us actually have to learn sometimes in the sales process is you have to be just a little bit more restrained in terms of the business opportunity you promise, knowing well and good that it's going to require a lot of work. Don't sell the upside without making people aware of the amount of commitment it takes to reach that upside. And then finally, this is my favorite part, is you have to learn to be responsive. Now, to the gents watching this conversation, I've got terrible news for you. The ladies are better at this than we are. Women are far better at this than we are. And here's how I know. I have perfectly scientific, proven evidence to support the argument that I'm about to make. My marriage. I've been married 12 years now. That's 12 by 12. That's 144 months. My wife and I have argued about 132 times. Do you know how many arguments I've won? 0. Now, how do I know this? My wife and I argue we argue about once a month, about something material. We never argue in December, because that's a good month. That's when the bonuses are paid. That's when you go on holiday. I also have scientific evidence to prove we don't argue in December. 2 of my 3 kids were conceived in December, boss. So, we know December is a good month for me, right? So it's Monday, it's January to November. That's when, we're in the institution of marriage. 132 arguments, and I've not won a single one. Let's take a step back here, because this bothers me. I have 2 degrees, 2 additional diplomas. I run 4 businesses in 3 different parts of the continent. I also run the fastest growing venture capital business in the continent. I'm not bragging, I'm making this point. I'm not dumb. I'm not stupid. So how come I've never won an argument with my wife? Here's why. Men and women argue differently. To the lads in the conversation, chaps, you know what I'm about to say is true. our argument as men starts when the argument starts. So if we're going to argue, now is when the argument starts. That's not the way women argue. The argument starts with your wife or your partner 2 weeks ago. You're just not in it. She starts the argument in her head. She archives the evidence about everything she's going to use against you. She even knows how she's going to start the argument in 2 weeks' time. She lets you make the mistakes, knowing she's going to use the mistakes to start the argument in 2 weeks' time. They argue with us in anticipation. So just to make the point, by the time the argument starts, you've lost. She's done decision trees. She knows if he says this, I say that. If he goes this way, I go that way. If he goes midway, before this thing even starts, you're finished. And the point about it, and I come back, is this. If you go back to that graph that I showed earlier, right? Being responsive is about listening to your downline, listening to your distributors, and listening to your customers, not with the intent to respond, but rather with the intent to understand so that you can act. And I think a lot of us in market, especially when you're under pressure, you've got to make the numbers. Especially when you're under pressure, you know what we do? We listen to the criticism and the feedback only with the intent to respond. Sometimes just take a moment, take a breath, understand what you're hearing, deeply internalize it and ask yourself, how do we get better at what we do every day? Listen with the intent to understand so that you can act. The next thing I want to share with you are what I call the cardinal 4 laws of how you build an amazing team, right? Cardinal 4 laws of how you build an amazing team. Law number 1, find the truth. Not your version of the truth, the truth. This is so important. So many of us look for versions of the truth when we're building teams and people without actually finding the absolute truth. And I'll come back to what this means in a minute. Law number 2, aim to be the best at what you do, not the biggest. I want to pause on this. Best might give you biggest. Biggest doesn't mean best. And I'll prove it. Let's just go back to that presentation because I need to show this to prove it. I'll prove it. So I want you to consider and ask yourself, did you ever have a BlackBerry phone? In fact, let's go back beyond that. If you ever had a Nokia phone, right? I did. Remember those days? Yeah. We almost all of us had a Nokia phone. Hands up if you knew who the Nokia shareholder was, Nokia CEO was, what the Nokia share price was, if you read the Nokia audited financial statements. Hell, if you went to a Nokia conference to do new product launches. No one? Yeah, because as is the case with the consumers and users of your products, is also the case with Nokia. They don't care. They only care if it works, if it's significant, and if it's relevant in their lives. They couldn't care what your plans are. They couldn't care what your numbers are. Are you relevant and meaningful in their lives? That's the mistake Nokia made. Let's go back to that presentation. So what happens? Nokia went from best to biggest. They left a massive wide gap. And you know who came in to fill that gap? BlackBerry. BlackBerry then went from best to biggest. Left a massive wide gaping gap. Who came in then? Apple. Today, it's a massive fight between the Americans, the Koreans, and the Chinese. But the point is, all of them are driven by one thing. You make the decision to support best. Whether or not they're the biggest is a consequence of whether or not they're the best. So I want you to ask yourself the question right now. Are you the best? Are you the best at leading, managing, and developing people? Are you the best at visioning the future and communicating that vision to your people? Are you the best at exciting customers about the product that they're buying? Are you the best at exciting your downline about the business opportunity that's in the business? Because if you're not, that's the change you need to make from performance here to here. What got you here won't get you there. Yeah? So, what I've shared here, just to close it off, are these 4 laws that I've spoken about. Let's come to the 3rd law very, very quickly, and I'm cognizant of time. Law number 3 is to recognize that vision excites people, not numbers. I'm a finance guy, so I spend my time looking at income statements and balance sheets. That's what I do. I make a decision about which business to get into, which business opportunity to get into, which business to buy, which technology to license, all of this based on financials. But here's what I recognize. Once I've made the financial assessment, I can't communicate the financial outcomes to my people. They don't care. Let me say it differently. In the most iconic speech of the 20th century, Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream." He said, in fact, "I have a dream that one day the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners, will they be able to break bread on the table of brotherhood? I have a dream today." You know what he didn't say? He didn't say, "I have an income statement, a balance sheet, standard operating processes. I have a presentation that I want to show you. I have this amazing business opportunity. I have a new product to launch." He didn't. He had a dream. So let me ask you the question, how many people in your immediate environment of influence know what your dream is? What you're doing this for? Why are you here? Why you bother? How many of their dreams do you know? Way beyond that, because what we learn about business, and it's the oldest lesson that human beings refuse to learn, financial success is a consequence of human connections. It's not the other way around. So you've got to find a way to deeply connect with the people in your sphere of influence, and that's what drives the financial success. And then the fourth and final law. Let me say, this is the hardest law of all. And why is this the hardest law of all? I battle with this. This is the one of all I'm very good at the first three. This is the one that's really, really hard. It's also, I know it's the hardest of all, because when I deal with business leaders and business managers, and I talk to them about the challenges they're having, this is the law that they all battle with. Very quickly, I want to get to it. I'm going to skip through all of these. I want to get to it and show you this fourth law. This fourth and final law is called leading by the business case. I'll say it again. Leading by the business case. Here's what that means. It means you have to learn to make the best decision for the business case, not the best decision for the people it suits around you. Whew. I'm going to pause, slow it down, give you a second to take that in. So I said 5 minutes ago, 3 perhaps, that financial success is a consequence of human connections, right? Yeah. Leading by the business case infers that when you have to make difficult decisions, the human connection cease to matter. It's what's in the best interest of what you're trying to do. So sometimes that means downgrading people that you love, that you get along with, but that are just not suited for the level they're operating in or for the job that they have. Remember my earlier statement, there are no such thing as bad soldiers, only bad generals? The reason the Americans say that is because if you send a soldier to the field of war and he cannot fire a gun, that's not his fault, that's the general's fault. So what it means for you and me, this thing about leading by the business case, and I want you just to be honest with yourself and pause for a minute and answer this question to yourself. What are the tough, difficult decisions you've got to make right now? Are you willing to make them? A lot of those decisions, by the way, my experience, all 15 years of it, doing what I do, 90% of the difficult decisions we have to make as leaders center around people, not business. It's interesting, right? Think about building a business. You've got to build IT infrastructure, the sales infrastructure, the marketing platform, the HR infrastructure. You've got to build a brand and all the rest of it, but 90% of the success of what you do hinges on people. You have to develop the ability as a leader, if you want to go from here, to lead by the business case. And that's just about making really, really tough decisions when the time is right. Because your people follow what you do, not what you say. They emulate how you act, not what you write down. They will follow and always do your acting way of life rather than the way you're professing life.